Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. And first of all, I'd like to quickly introduce myself and introduce the topic for today. My name is Sheetal Arora, and I am the Director of Research and Resources at SHEROES, India. And through this series of webinar, what we're trying to achieve today is to tell you more about, analytics as a career choice, specifically for women, and what it's got in store for each one of us. So, without any further ado, with me today, I have Sarita Digumarti, who is the co-founder of Jigsaw Academy. It's a Bangalore-based organization, and they are primarily into analytics, big data, and Hadoop trainings. They are the pioneers in this field. They've been around for a very long time. And it's an absolute privilege and honor to have you, Sarita. Thank you so much for making time for this webinar.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
yes, I can hear you absolutely fine. So, before we get started, ladies, just your quick housekeeping rules. Kindly keep yourselves on mute. And as and when you have questions, you can type in those questions on the chat room, and I will be moderating this webinar and I will be asking those questions to Sarita directly. So, Sarita, before we move forward, could you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and a little bit more about Jigsaw Academy and how it all started, really?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. If I could just share my screen for a minute.
Sure.
So let me just pull up the presentation. Welcome everyone. My name is Sarita. I am one of the co-founders of Jigsaw Academy. Here's a little bit of a profile about me. I have now over 18 years of overall experience, primarily in analytics and consulting. I worked both in India and the US. A lot of my experience has been in the area of retail analytics, so helping retailers make sense of their data, but also healthcare, financial services, to some extent IT analytics, etc. I have a master's degree in economics from the US, and I have an MBA from India. Jigsaw Academy is a company I co-founded along with Gaurav Vora about 6 years ago. We focus on training, on subjects related to data, right? So essentially, we try to make sure that if you're looking for any training related or skilling related to data, it could be data visualization, it could be big data processing, it could be advanced analytics, it could be machine learning or AI. We provide training. And this training we provide for individuals, we provide this for corporate clients, so a lot of corporate customers, as well as we provide training for universities as partners with universities for certification programs. So that's broadly what we do.
Cool. Sarita, before we move forward, could you kindly, stop the annotation for all the
Yeah,
participants?
let me try and
Yeah.
make sure that I know how to do that. Let me see. Disable participants annotation. Okay, done.
Cool. And are you also able to delete the scribble that we have on your screen?
Yeah, okay.
Or if you stop share and start again, it should go away.
Okay, let me just try that. Just give me 1 sec. Okay, and let me share my screen again. Okay, yes, perfect.
Cool, wonderful. Right. So, so my next question to you, Sarita, you've already talked about so many different terminologies: machine learning, big data, analytics, AI, and when we go out in the job market, most of the jobs are somehow related to, at least a vast majority of the jobs today are related to all of these big terminologies. So tell us more about what is this buzz really all about, the data science, what exactly is it? If you're able to tell us more about it, please.
Yes. So in fact, I've got a set of slides that I've prepared for this webinar, and one of the first things I do want to talk about is what exactly is analytics, and especially a lot of terminology around analytics, because most people now have heard about data science, analytics, or visualization or big data, but there's also a lot of confusion on exactly what is involved in analytics and how is it different. What do all these terminologies mean? So let me just very quickly talk about analytics. And I'm primarily going to use a couple of examples, but let me just first pull up this one slide that talks about all the different terms in analytics. So at the very beginning, and I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about this because this is important to understand. Anytime you deal with data, and a lot of companies have been dealing with data for a very long time, right? So anytime you do any kind of data analysis, let's say you have an Excel spreadsheet, you're creating a trend chart, you're looking at a pivot table, you're trying to do some simple visualization, you're trying to do some aggregation, some averaging. All of that in the context of a business situation or a company's data is data mining, right? The ability to look at data, to look at raw data and sort of try and get some information out of it is the process of data mining. Now notice here that I've said data and information, there are two different things. Raw data is simply passive, right? It is just rows and columns of numbers. Information is what you get out of the data. So many companies for a very long time, 50, 100 plus years, have been looking at data that they have collated to sort of understand what is happening, what sort of customers do they have, what products are selling, what is not selling, what is working, what is not working. So all of that comes under the umbrella term of data mining. Now very often the kind of questions that companies usually ask involve looking at historical data to understand what happened. So what happened to my sales, what happened to my customers, which products are selling, which insurance claims am I, which kind of region of India do I get more insurance claims. So any kind of industry or sector, you have all of these questions that companies want to sort of answer because that helps them understand what is happening with their business. And typically historical data analysis is something that most of us have some understanding of, may not be sophisticated, but most of us have some understanding of it. And this is usually in the bucket of reporting and business intelligence, right? And I'm sure most of you have heard of those terms, reporting and business intelligence. It's essentially about telling companies what happened by looking at data, right? Now, it is very, very important, very, very critical for companies to be able to have good, robust reporting and business intelligence processes in place, because if they don't continuously keep getting that information, it doesn't help them plan, it doesn't help them understand what exactly is happening, right? However, what has happened is that over time, companies say, okay, I understand what happened, right? But that is not enough, because now ideally, if I know what has happened, I want to sort of understand why it has happened and what will happen, right? And typically that's where a lot of advanced data mining or analytics comes in, because traditionally when people are talking about analytics, they're talking about the ability to take historical data and come up with a prediction about the future. What will my sales be next week, right? What will my sales be next year? What kind of categories are going to sell? So if I do this kind of marketing, what kind of return on investment will I see if I spend this much money in TV, right? How many incremental customers will I get if I do this kind of promotion activity? So a lot of these future sort of questions are what are typically usually called analytics, and very specifically predictive analytics. So essentially when you're talking about analytics, you're talking about the ability to mine historical data for information that will help you make predictions about the future, right? And so many times what people do is they will call business intelligence and reporting as descriptive analytics, because you're describing what has happened, and they will talk about this ability to predict the future as predictive analytics, because you are trying to predict the future. Now remember that if you are trying to predict the future, right, you are doing something that is reasonably complicated, right? Because making any sort of predictions about the future is difficult, and making predictions in the context of business situations where there is a lot of money at stake, you have to be very, very clear about how you're arriving at that prediction, how confident you are. So it has to be something that you're doing with a lot of rigor, and therefore it does involve an increased level of complexity. So that is predictive analytics. And some of you may also have heard of the term prescriptive analytics, which is essentially, once I know what is going to happen in the future, how do I generate a strategy or an implementation of that outcome, which is prescriptive analytics. Now another very common term that people hear in the context of data analytics is data science, and data science and analytics are pretty much used interchangeably, right? Another term that is again very, very important and people hear it all the time is big data, right? Now what is big data? And one of the things I do want to emphasize here is that big data per se is not analytics, right? Where big data comes into the picture is about the kind of data that companies are generating now, right? So most of us, when we think of data, what comes to our mind? You will think of maybe an Excel spreadsheet, maybe a database. It has rows and columns of numbers, right? That is typically what we think is data. But if you think about what, the environment that we live in currently, right? Let's say that I go to Facebook and I upload a photo of my vacation on Facebook. Is that data? That is also data,
Yes.
right? Or let's say I go to a website and I give them a review, right? And I say, whatever, I used their services and I was extremely happy with them. Now that is also data. Now the problem with data like this is that it is not structured. How will I put a photo in a database? How do I make it a row and column format? How will I put text in a database? So one of the things that companies are dealing with now is that because we are collecting data now of so many different types, traditional database systems are not equipped to handle this kind of data, right? An RDBMS system doesn't know what to do with an image. You have to process it in order to be able to use that information in a database. So because of these different kinds of data, typically what we call semi-structured or unstructured data, you need a different set of tools and technologies that can process the data. So one is just the type of data, and the second is volume, right? So the rate at which we are collecting, generating, storing data has exponentially increased, right? So if you think of somebody like a Flipkart, just imagine how much data that they are collecting, right? Think about it, right? Every minute, every second, so many transactions, so many products, so many customers on the website, and they collect so much information, not just on the products that were bought, but also on who came, how much time did they spend on each page, what products did they look at but did not buy, what products did they add to the cart but did not buy. You think about it, right? They're just collecting tremendous amounts of data. And the issue with that data, the size of the data, is processing, right? Typically when we think about processing data, right, it is sequential processing. You put it in a database and let's say you ask a query, what were my sales, how many customers came to my website yesterday. Now for somebody like Flipkart, even answering a simple question like that may be complicated because they have just so much data. You run a query, it will take you 2 hours or 3 hours to get that answer. It doesn't work. So therefore what they need is they need parallel processing, some way of taking all of this data but processing it faster. And typically what happens is they will put it on multiple servers and they will break the data up across multiple servers and do parallel processing. I write one query, but it gets processed parallelly. So I don't have to wait 2-3 hours to get the answer. I can get it right away. So when people talk about big data, they are essentially talking about this underlying technology and techniques and tools that enable companies to process data that is very, very large, high volume, of very, very different types, which is, text data, image data, regular data, and which is coming at you at a very high speed, right?
Right.
So big data becomes an enabler of analytics. It is not directly analytics, because remember, finally what you want to do with all of this data is generate insights and information from the data. So you have to perform analytics on big data, but big data directly is not analytics. Another term that people talk about is machine learning, right? So what is machine learning? Again, a lot of the predictions that you're going to make are on the basis of mathematical and statistical algorithms, right? Typically, if you want to make a prediction, the simplest is, let's say, a trend line. A trend line allows you to make a prediction, but it is a very simple straight line algorithm. And of course, you want complex predictions, there are complex algorithms. Many algorithms are dependent on statistics, right? So at some point, you have to have a good understanding of statistics to be able to, sort of use or build or, apply an analytics algorithm. But increasingly, there are more and more algorithms that are not statistics based, that are more math based, and that essentially, are can work better with unstructured data, like image data or audio data or video data. Sometimes you need very, very advanced analytics algorithms, and that is where machine learning comes in. Machine learning are a class of algorithms that are essentially more useful when you need real-time answers, when you need accuracy. So I'll give you a simple example of a machine learning algorithm, right? Let's say that you have a photo of a person and you are trying to classify, is this a male or a female? Right? Now, typically, if a human does it, we will use our judgment, right? And our judgment is based on our understanding of the face, their hair. You can tell. How does a machine figure that out, right? The machine can also figure out if you give it a lots of photos. Let's say you give it 1,000,000 photos and you tell them, okay, these are male, these are female. At the end of the day, the machine will sort of figure out some sort of algorithm to say, okay, if I see these parameters, this is male. If I see these parameters, this is female. You may not need to understand exactly how it is doing it, as long as you're confident that the answer it is giving is correct, right?
Accurate.
And that's sort of what machine learning does. It's advanced analytics, advanced algorithms, where speed is important, where you're dealing with unstructured data, but it is very much a part of analytics, right? You will use machine learning algorithms for some cases, you might use statistical algorithms for other cases. And
Fair
finally,
enough.
there is artificial intelligence, another term that everyone's talking about, with again limited understanding. artificial intelligence is an extension of machine learning, right? What you're trying to do in an artificial intelligence system is that you're trying to make sure that a human is not required to take some decisions, right? So the simplest example that everyone is comfortable with is driverless cars, right? It is a artificially intelligent system because you ideally would like the car to drive itself without human intervention. Now, for a car to drive itself, it needs to take a series of decisions, right? And that those decisions are on the basis of rules, and those rules are on the basis of data, right? Essentially, it is a collection of multiple algorithms and outcomes that enable an artificially intelligent system to be built. So if you're looking at artificial intelligence, a lot of it is primarily driven by machine learning algorithms and the data that is fed into the artificial intelligence system. So that's broadly what analytics is. And for most people, when they think of analytics, they think of analytics as a way to help businesses make decisions, right? To take
Yeah.
smarter decisions, to make faster decisions, to be able to identify customers better, to be able to make sure that the products are selling correctly, right? But analytics is more than just a decision making system, right? Another thing that people have to I think understand now is that our world is driven on data, right? A lot of the products and the services and the decisions and our environment, a lot of it is influenced by the data that is being collected. So it is more than just helping businesses take decisions, right? A lot of times analytics is responsible for designing a product and services, right? Netflix is a great example, right? Netflix used to be a streaming service, and some of you may have Netflix account where we watch videos, we watch TV shows, etc. But one of the things that Netflix has been able to do on the basis of analytics is go from being a streaming service to a content, from being like a content streaming service to somebody who creates content. They create TV shows, and you understand that creating shows is a much more expensive and complicated proposition than
Yeah.
streaming content, right? If you're creating, you're investing, and you're investing a lot of money, and you want to make sure that you're doing that because you expect success from it, right? And Netflix was able to do that because they have all of this data on user preferences. They have all this data on what people like to see, what kind of people like to see what kind of things. And they were able to make this massive transition from somebody who was like a video shop, like a DVD delivery, DVD
Yeah.
rental shop, to somebody who's making movies and making shows, right? And they did it on the basis of data. So more and more, this idea of data is becoming very important to all of us. It doesn't sort of matter what our background is or what our career paths are. All of us have to do more and more data mining, more data analysis, and increasingly quite sophisticated data analytics. And that's why when you see all of these terms, it's because it is a very dynamic field, lot of interest in the field, lot of changes in the field, and a lot of technology and innovations very, very high in this field.
Fair enough. It's then safe to say that it's not industry agnostic. It's not just limited to sales or marketing or retail for that matter. It's as you rightly said, it's not a decision making system. And I ask this question primarily because there will be women watching this webinar who are not restricted to one industry. We've got women in HR, we've got women in supply chain, we've got women in manufacturing or production or whatever. So is it applicable to all industries?
Right. Right. So one of the reasons for why everyone talks about analytics, and there's just so much interest and a lot of and some people say this is hype, right? A lot of people sometimes will come to us and say, hey, is this the new, like, 2-year hype, 3-year hype? After this, what happens, right? And my answer to them is basically to think about this for a minute, right? Fundamentally, analytics is about making sense of data and helping businesses make sure that they're making the most of the data that they have available. Now, one thing that seems very certain is that we are moving towards a world where more and more data is going to be generated and collected, not less, right? All of us understand this. We are collecting all kinds of data. Some of this data didn't even exist like 2-3 years ago. So for example, how many of us have fitness trackers like a Fitbit or something like that we put on our wrist, right? Yeah, there you go. Now think about this, right? The Fitbit is collecting so much data, and not just the number of steps that you have walked, right? It, in fact, it knows how much you're sleeping, how many times you turn when you're sleeping, right? How deep has your sleep been? How many steps have you climbed? What has been the trend over time? Do you walk more on weekends or weekdays? Think about it, right? Every single thing that we do is probably being tracked, right?
That's
And this
scary.
trend is going to continue. We are going to track more and more. So fundamentally, we are only going to deal with more data. We are not going to deal with less. And the more data you have, the more complex it's going to become to process it. So one of the reasons for why everyone talks about data is because this is a very fundamental requirement of the environment that we live in, and it is only going to increase. Our reliance and dependency on data is going to increase. The second thing, like you said, is because think of data in terms of industries or sectors. Can we really think of any industry, any sector, any functional area where we say data is not important? I'm in HR, I don't need to look at data. I'm in supply chain, my decisions are based on the basis of gut. It doesn't work like that, right? It doesn't matter whether you're in telecom, you're in sales, you're in operations, you're in financial services, you're in pharmaceuticals, you're in the government, you're in an NGO, right? All of us are going to deal with more and more data. And one of the reasons why therefore there is so much interest in data science and analytics skills is because everybody needs them, right? Every kind of business needs them, every functional area needs them, at every level you need it, right? People that are entering the job market now are required to have better data skills, better data processing skills, better data visualization skills, better data analysis skills. People who are already working professionals, let's say, I'm in marketing, or I'm a branch manager in a bank. You are expected to do more and more better decisions, and you're expected to use the data well, right? And that is why some of the stuff that I put on the slide is all from newspapers and LinkedIn, where it is very evident that this is a top skill. So for example, LinkedIn publishes every year top skills that are based on jobs posted on LinkedIn site. And statistical analysis, data mining was number 1 or number 2 across all the countries that they surveyed, right, in last year and this year, right? And it is fundamentally around the fact that these are skills that are extremely critical across domains, across industries, across sectors. And that's why the world is looking desperately for people with these skills, and there are just not enough people who have the right amount of skills. So the skilling is not keeping pace with the rate of innovation around data and the data analytics.
Fair. Now, obviously, Sarita, you've given us a lot of reasons to explore and consider analytics as a career option. But I'm also keen to figure out, do you think it's a good career option for women specifically? Because we've got slightly different set of requirements, our expectations from a workplace, etc., etc. So do you think it's a good option for women?
Okay, this is a question I'd like to answer because I'm a woman in analytics, and I've spent a lot of time in analytics. Let me talk a little bit about what sort of skill sets you need to have for analytics, and then I'll come back to women in analytics specifically. So in terms of skill sets, right, data science, analytics, machine learning, these are all reasonably quantitative in the sense that you don't have to be like a PhD in math or a statistics person, but you do have to be reasonably comfortable with numbers, which means you can't be afraid of numbers. You can't say, hey, I can't look at numbers, it freaks me out. But as long as you are you're comfortable with numbers and you have a logical approach to problem solving, because finally in data science you're trying to solve problems for businesses, right? So if you have a logical and analytical approach, if you're reasonably comfortable working with numbers, working with Excel, working with databases, and you have a high sense of curiosity, these are inherent skills that are very important for people who are considering a career in data science, right? And the high sense of curiosity is especially important because it's about problem solving, and many times these problems are not going to get solved very easily, right? So you have to keep asking questions, you have to be persistent, you have to be curious, and you have to sort of make sure that you're collating information all along to help you solve problems. So inherently you need to have these skills, but obviously you also need to have some additional skills. So for example, statistics and its application to business, analytics methodology. You have to have an understanding of predictive modeling techniques. So for example, regression models or forecasting models. You have to have an understanding of machine learning models, so clustering or decision trees. You have to have a good understanding of tools, right? Because when you're dealing with very, very large volumes of data, then you need specialized tools to work with them. So R or Python or some of the big data. Maybe sometimes you need to add machine learning as well as concepts, because increasingly companies are looking at very sophisticated sort of applications of data science and machine learning. So you will have to learn a fairly large set of skills in order to build a career in data science. But one of the reasons why I think women especially will do well in analytics is primarily around what you're trying to accomplish with the data science or the analytics project, right? At the end of the day, right, it is about coming up with solutions, coming up with innovations in the context of a business situation. And while technical expertise is very, very important, right, what really makes this successful is that you need people who can think logically, who can communicate well, and who can be good team players. And the reason these three are important is because, a, you have to continuously talk to multiple stakeholders in a business situation. Analytics is not something that happens in isolation. Data science doesn't happen in isolation. It always is in the context of a business situation, a business function, a business problem, right? So let's say I'm trying to solve a marketing analytics problem. I have to continuously keep talking to people in marketing. I have to talk to the business owners. I have to talk to the data science people that are implementing the model. So there's a lot of team activity, and I think women excel at working with teams, right? The second, logical thinking, right, which is again, you're trying to solve a problem, and these are complex problems, right? So the answers are not very obvious. You need people who can think logically, who can say, okay, step A, step B, step C, who can apply frameworks, who can apply methodologies, who can understand, okay, now I have this constraint, so therefore I should try something else. And I think women are very, very good at logical thinking. And the third is around communication, right? Many analytics and data science projects fail because you do a great project, you get a great output, but you haven't been able to sell it to the business. You haven't been able to help the business understand why they should look at this, or why it will help them, or how it helps, right? And so communication skills also become very, very important. And traditionally, in my mind, and I've worked with, like I said, I've worked in analytics for a long time, and I've been lucky to work with many women within the data science and analytics teams. And I'd say that, in this field, in fact, the participation of women is extremely high, right? In the data science and analytics field, traditionally there have been a lot of women who have worked in analytics in India as well for a long time, have risen to leadership positions. And all the women that I've worked with, I feel, have a little bit of an edge sometimes over the men, because over and above the technical skills, they sort of excel at some of these softer skills, which is communication, the team playing, and some amount of logical thinking. So if you are considering data science, you should keep this in mind, that there are some strengths that women have that will naturally come into play. Of course, you have to build technical skills, but I think women are smarter in general, so I think they find it easier to pick them up. But the soft skills also are very helpful in general to build a successful career in data science.
Perfect. I already feel great about being a woman just now. Right. So that's about women in general, women in analytics. But tell me more about, women who are trying to make a career comeback after a break. They are exploring options. They are retraining themselves. Does that mean that, let's say, if I had a 6 years of experience in HR, I take a HR analytics course with Jigsaw Academy. Does that mean that my chances to get back into workforce would be much higher compared to a peer? Or do I need to do more than just taking a course? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So we work with a lot of women similar to this audience. Some of them, are in the workforce currently, but are seriously thinking about long-term options, and are thinking about making sure that they are, current in terms of skill set. Because, as we all know, it's become really, really competitive. The workplace has become very competitive, and the expectation is that you are constantly upgrading yourself in terms of skills and understanding, and, the ability to generate value for whichever company you're working for. So that's one audience, which is essentially working professionals that are already in the workforce, but are looking to make sure that they are current and employable, and that the value that they're generating, is visible to companies, to their employers. The second set is people who have taken a break, usually because of marriage or children, and essentially now they'd like to re-enter the workforce, right? And so they're trying to figure out what would be the good way for them to sort of, make that re-entry. Right. So broadly speaking, there are two sorts of courses that you can do, right? You can do very focused shorter term courses, or you can do longer term courses, right? The way I'm looking at it is, the first decision is whether or not you are looking at data science as an option, right? So one of the first things that you'll have to do is that if you're re-entering the workforce, or let's say you are currently in the workforce, but you're looking at upskilling, you have to sort of evaluate what are the skills that you need to add to your resume. Many times data science and analytics is something that you should seriously look at, because as you grow in your career, the expectation is that as a senior professional, you will have better data skills, data analytics, data understanding, data interpretation, data visualization. You are expected to have those skills, because you are expected to take decisions a lot faster than many other people, and you need to make sure that your decisions are backed up by something, usually data. right? So I would definitely say that, whatever your stage of career, data skills is something that you should look at. Now the next question becomes short term versus long term, right? And essentially it's about making sure that you're picking the right choice for the stage of career that you're in, right? If you are currently working and let's say that your primary focus is on getting some basic understanding of analytics, some understanding of what is possible, what is doable, sort of very specific applications, then you may want to look at a shorter term course, right? Because there what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to build one specific set of skills, I'm going to focus on one tool. So for example, I'm going to learn analytics, but I'm going to learn it with R, because R is very popular, etc. Or I come from an IT background, I have a lot of programming experience, so I'd like to be able to figure out how programming fits into analytics. So maybe I will do big data analytics with Python, right? So typically these are short courses that focus on one skill at a time. Typically they last 3 to 4 months, and they will be an initial kickstarter. So they help you, first gauge, what exactly is data science, what is involved, and then pick up some essential skills to begin with, and then over time you can keep adding to that skill set, right? So I would recommend this for people that are currently working, that essentially are looking at saying that, hey, maybe I need to have a better understanding of this because this is something that I'm going to need increasingly in the long run. Uh, and a caveat to that would be people that are coming from specific domains. So for example, like the example that you gave, let's say that I've been working in HR for 6 years. Now, ideally, I don't really want to learn about analytics as it applies to, let's say, supply chain, right? Ideally, I'd like to be understanding, okay, analytics and how does this work for HR, right? So what you want to do is do a short-term course, but try and do a course that is very focused on the domain. So for example, at Jigsaw, we offer courses on HR analytics. And the idea is that if you come from an HR background, you learn the analytics, but you learn it in the context of HR data, HR operations, HR processes, HR use cases. Similarly, if you come from a supply chain background, you learn supply chain analytics. If you come from a, let's say, financial services background, do financial services analytics. Social media background, try and do social media analytics, because then your learning is more useful because the analytic skills are directly related to the functional area or the industry area that you are a part of, right? So that definitely becomes important. Now, for people that are significantly at higher levels of experience, so let's say you already have 8, 10, 12 years of experience, or you are one of those people who has taken a career break and is looking to re-enter the job market, you may not be able to manage with a short-term course. And the reason for that is, if you're trying to re-enter the workforce, you have to have skills that are more than what somebody who's not taken a break is supposed to have. What I mean by that is, you are at a disadvantage because that's how, unfortunately for us, that's how the system works here. The minute you take a break, employers start wondering about, okay, your skills are a little old, you've really taken a break, the world has moved on. So in order to be able to sort of get employers to talk to you, your resume has to be better than many other people, right? And what that means is that you need to have more than one skill. You need to be able to show that you are really, you have a set of skills that is very attractive, right? In order for employers to say, even though you've had a break, I'm very interested in speaking with you, right? Because I can see that you have a set of skills, especially if those set of skills are related to your previous background. So for example, if somebody's been in IT for a long time, then ideally I would recommend, and they've taken a break, I would recommend try and do like a big data full stack program, which talks about big data engineering, big data analytics, machine learning and big data. So A, your past experience is leveraged because programming is important, but B, you're not just talking about one skill in Hadoop or one skill in Pig, right? You're talking about end-to-end understanding that makes you attractive to a potential employer. So it is important for people who have taken a break to make sure that their resumes are better than, in the 90th percentile, not the 60th percentile. And the second audience that I would recommend long-term courses to is people who already have substantial experience. So if you, let's say you have 10 years, 11 years, 12 years of experience or more, and now you're trying to pick data skills, the expectation from employers about your understanding of data science is going to be very different from the expectation for somebody who's more junior, right? Employers will expect you to have strategic understanding of data science, a full spectrum understanding, right? The ability to say, I understand enough data science to be able to come up with strategy, come up with innovation, come up with solutions, right? And that will not happen on a short-term course because a short-term course focuses on one thing. Whereas longer-term courses or executive programs, they include a mix of in-person training and online training. but they are longer duration, they have more in-depth coverage, and they're aimed at audiences that are experienced. That would be more useful for somebody who already has a significant amount of experience. So for example, we have a program that we run with the University of Chicago, which is one of the top 3 universities in the world, right? Very, very prestigious university, maximum number of Nobel Prize laureates. But we run this program, which is an executive program in data science and machine learning, and this is aimed for people who either have a lot of experience or who are looking to re-enter the workforce, and they need a solid set of credentials to be able to present as a reason to sort of reason for potential employers to talk to them. So something which is very, very in-depth, that includes fairly intensive course coverage, but includes certification that is globally recognized, and that may be useful for people who are looking at this in a long-term basis.
Fair enough. So just another trailing question from the same one is, if somebody is coming back after a career break, takes up a course in analytics, is that enough usually, or do you recommend them to brush up on their skills otherwise? Is there more internships that they can do, some live projects that they can undertake?
Right. So again, it's a very good question. One of the things that I tell people that come to me for career counseling or looking at courses in analytics is to take it seriously. And what I mean by that is that you have to understand that coming back into the job market is a big step, right? And you have to make sure that you do a set of things that make you an attractive candidate, right? Many times somebody, let's say, has 5-7 years of experience, and they've taken a break for 4 years, and then they say, okay, I'm going to do this course and then I'm going to apply for jobs. It's not going to be enough, right? Because employers definitely have this issue around the break and employability, and where am I going to fit you, and your peers have moved on, and all of these standard questions. So again, it comes back to making sure that there is a anyone looking at your resume is absolutely impressed, right? And how does that happen? It happens in a variety of ways, right? One is that you need to be able to build a resume that connects your past experience to what you've learned now, right? Many people don't do that. They will have a resume that is as is, and then there will be one line that says, okay, certified in this program. Okay, but what is the connection, right? Why, what is your story about why you've chosen this set of skills? How do you think this is going to add value to a potential employer? So one thing is to pay a lot of attention to your resume and make sure that there is a story, that there is a positioning that you're doing for yourself that connects your past experience to the skills that you've learned now. The second thing is the ability to show that you have worked on live projects, right? And again, this becomes very important because typically with certification, what happens is employers will say, okay, but this is training. What projects have you worked on? Again, you want to pick a program that includes something that has a lot of live projects. For example, a long-term program like this University of Chicago program will have a live project with a client. So for example, in the current batch for this program, we have 8 different companies that have provided projects for the students. So Pepsi, for example, has given a problem statement, a data set. And so this is something that you can showcase as live experience. So that becomes very, very important. The third thing is around what additional opportunities do you have to showcase talent, right? So for example, at Jigsaw, we run a lot of contests or again live projects for our students. Essentially, we get companies to come in and give us a problem statement, and our students are free to apply their learning. And then the student that does well gets a recommendation letter from the company which says, this person worked on this project, they were do blah blah blah. And so that becomes evidence of not just learning but also doing an actual experience, right? And again, becomes important, right? And then internships, right? Many times the way to get back into the job market is stepwise. Maybe it's a good idea to start looking at an internship option because it gives you some confidence as you get back into the workplace. It counts as work experience, and for companies many times, if you start an internship program and you do well, they're very happy to absorb you, right? So the ability to offer internships becomes very important. Again, something that we do quite a bit at Jigsaw, because we have seen that you really have to plan for this move, right? It does not happen automatically. Just because you have spent 3 months learning one new skill is not necessarily enough. You have to be able to connect all of these together and really position yourself as somebody who is going to be able to add value to a company, to that role, right? And this is how my past experience, my current skill set, my internship experience or my project experience, all of them have to come together.
Perfect. So you're saying basically we have to build our story. It just can't be, I've done a course and I'm good to restart now.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I've seen this happen so often, and to some extent it doesn't matter. You could have done a course with, let's say, a really top university in the world, let's say an IM Bangalore, right? But unless there is some connection, you put in some time into thinking about what your positioning is, it's not going to help. The other mistake
Yeah.
that a lot of people make is that they they don't really think about what are the roles that they're applying for, right? You just apply to any role, and then you sort of start feeling disappointed because you're not getting callbacks and sort of lose energy, right? Because it's also very important, along with positioning, is the identification of the kind of roles that you should be applying to, and these two go hand in hand, right? You want to
Correct.
maximize the success chances of getting callbacks, but there has to be a story, there has to be a positioning, there has to be a value proposition, therefore aimed at very specific roles, and this takes work. People underestimate how much work it takes.
Correct. I understand, and I completely agree with you on that one, Sarita. My next question to you is, so I get asked this question quite often whenever, because I am personally a big advocate of women in analytics. So I do talk about this career option a lot, and I get asked quite a few times. It sounds as if it's a very highly technical sort of work. If somebody does not have a programming background, ideally cannot get into analytics. Do you think that's true? And what do you have to say to that?
That is absolutely not true. And I'll tell you why, because, I'm a great example of someone who doesn't have a programming background. I have an economics degree and I have a MBA. I have not learned any programming. Now, is programming involved in analytics? Yes, right? And the reason that programming is involved in analytics is because when you're dealing with very large data sets and you're trying to do lots of analysis of large data sets, then menu based tools sometimes are not useful. So something like an Excel, where you don't have to do any programming, you just use options, sometimes they may not work because the volumes are too high, what you're trying to do is too complicated. So the specialized tools that you will use, let's say an R or a SAS or a Python, will require some programming. However, the programming is simply the ability to use a tool, right? Your role is not to become a programmer, right? Your role is to become a data scientist. So can I use the tool appropriately and therefore do whatever little programming is required? Yes, right? And it's very, the programming per se is not difficult to learn. If you have, even if you have zero programming, right? No SQL, no programming at all, we get a lot of students who learn this because the focus is on application. The focus is not on making you a programmer, right? So that's one answer. One is that it's not true that you have to have a programming background. It definitely helps because you'll pick it up faster, but it is not a prerequisite, and the programming that you will learn is very straightforward, right? It is not intensive programming. The second is that not all the roles in data science are similar, right? So there are some roles that require advanced programming skills, especially on the big data side, on the IT, maybe the machine learning, advanced machine learning side, you need more programming. But let's say you're doing HR analytics, let's say you're doing marketing analytics, many times you can do the analytics in Excel, or if you have very large volumes of data, something like an R, where ready-made packages are available and your programming requirements are actually quite minimal, right? So it also depends on the role. If you come from an IT background, I would definitely recommend that look at big data, machine learning, where your programming background is relevant. But there are many analytics roles where programming is not necessarily a prerequisite. You have to be comfortable with it, and that is very easily taught. But it's not a prerequisite.
Fair enough. So if somebody is already in their career working full time, how do you think one should plan a transition into a career in analytics?
Right. So if you're already working full time, the good news is that now there are just so many options, right? Even 5-7 years ago, it was just very hard. You had limited options, and a lot of them would involve classroom training, which is sort of hard for people to manage when they have full time jobs. Currently, there are just tons of options, right? So these include short-term courses that are done primarily online. So you do them at your own pace, at your own convenience. You don't have to travel anywhere, and you can sort of fit it around your schedule, right? Many times, you'll have 4 or 5 months. Let's say you spend 4 to 5 hours a week. You can easily finish a short-term course in, let's say, 4 months or so, right? Then there are also options that are executive programs, longer term programs, but designed for working professionals. So essentially, for example, something like this University of Chicago program, uh, this includes classroom training and online training, but everything happens on weekends, right? So essentially, Monday to Friday, there is no disruption to your work schedule. Once every 3 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks, depending on the program, you will have to spend a weekend, doing classroom training, and in between, you will have online classes again on weekends, right? And most of these, your assignments, your sort of all the work that you do is done on a cloud-based lab, so you can access it from anywhere. You can access it anytime. You can review the content on your mobile. So actually, for professionals that are already working, this nowadays I don't think really that there is any dearth of options, right? These programs are designed for minimum disruption to work life. Having said that, obviously you will have to put in effort. And what I mean by that is, as long as you're able to plan 4 to 5 hours a week that you need to spend on learning, you'll easily be able to do this. But the 4 to 5 hours is important. The good news is those 4 to 5 hours can be anywhere. It can be in your commute, right? It can be a little late evening after your kids go to bed, right? But as long as you're able to plan that 4 to 5 hours or 6 hours per week, you will easily be able to manage even if you're a full-time working professional.
Fair enough. Right, so we'll get started with the Q&A now, Sarita, and as we go along, I'd love to know more about this program as well as we go along. So I have a question here from Galaxy J7 Prime. I don't have a name. What is the difference between BI and analytics, they're asking?
So what is the difference between BI and?
Analytics.
And analytics. So I think I answered this question right in the beginning. Essentially, business intelligence, let me just minimize this for a minute. Business intelligence and reporting typically tend to be used together. Business intelligence is the ability to sort of look at historical data that a company has and answer questions about what has happened, right? So what happened to my sales, what happened to my categories, which categories performed well, how many claims did I get last month, what service plans worked well for me, what sort of ratings did I get for each of my categories. So typically those kind of questions that look at historical data to answer what happened, right, is business intelligence. And usually when people are saying analytics different from business intelligence, they're talking about predictive analytics, which is if I have data on what happened, can I make a forecast or a prediction about what will happen, right? And usually when people are saying BI and analytics, BI is historical data analysis to understand what happened. Analytics is predictive analytics, what will happen.
Right. Okay, the next question is, what tools does one use for analyzing data, or what kind of skills are required for data analyst? I believe you've already covered those, but do you want to quickly just,
Yeah, if I could just quickly summarize. So there are a wide variety of tools. It depends on what kind of analysis you're doing. So for example, let's say you're trying to focus primarily on data visualizations, then maybe you use Tableau, maybe you use Excel. If you're doing predictive modeling, if you're trying to build, let's say, a time series forecast, what will my sales be in the next 3 quarters? You want to use a tool like R, which does predictive modeling, maybe SAS. If let's say you're trying to implement a very, very complicated machine learning algorithm, then maybe you use something like Python or Spark. You're trying to figure out simple data analysis, but on a very, very large set of data or very complex data set, then maybe you use big data. So the tools are varied. More and more tools are added, every year. But it also depends on what exactly you're trying to accomplish, right? And then skills required for a data analyst, I think I spoke about these. There are some technical skills, data understanding, analytics methodology, algorithm understanding, tool expertise, and then there are some inherent skills, which is being able to apply a logical framework, being comfortable with numbers, being a good communicator. All of these are skills that a data analyst requires.
Can someone also learn analytics if one is in client support?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If you think about client support, right, and think about career growth in client support, as you grow in your career, right, you will have to do more. Let's say you're an individual contributor now, but let's say you become a team lead, then you become a manager. A lot of a lot of efficiency and improvement is going to come from understanding what sort of questions do you get, what is the main reasons that you're getting support questions, and being able to analyze the data to be able to say, hey, this is how we will reduce the number of questions we get, or this is how we will handle more questions with the same number of people that we have. So absolutely, there is a lot of applicability of analytics within the client servicing space, and two, it is very interesting and useful to understand and learn analytics in that context, because you will be able to add a lot of value as someone who can look at data and come up with solutions in the client servicing space.
Right. The next question comes from Pihu. She's asking, I'm working as HR professional since last 6 years, but current role doesn't involve HR analytics. But I'm interested to get into this profile. What is the chance of getting new job in HR analytics after completion of HR analytics certification?
I think the chances are very high. HR analytics is in fact one of our best selling courses because analytics has come a little late to HR, right? Suddenly in the last 2 years, there's increased interest in HR analytics, and we are seeing a lot of interest from corporates as well for training, right? So, for example, for one of the largest consulting companies in the world, we've done training where we trained 300 HR professionals on HR analytics, and they were spread over India, China, South America, the US, and Europe. Okay, 300 people, and we are seeing more and more of these demands, right? And already you have a solid set of experiences in HR, 6 years, and I think if you can add analytic skills, you will be in high demand.
Cool. So, Pehu, you know exactly what you need to do now. The next question comes from Saloni. She's asking, where is college located in Bangalore? I was a EA to CEO, so she was an executive assistant to the CEO for 14 years. And now I'm looking at moving into strategy or chief of staff role. Is this a good option for me? She's asking.
Right. So Saloni, we offer two kinds of training. We offer online training, which is, the short courses are all done online. So there is no physical sort of intervention. And we offer longer term courses that have a mix of classroom training plus, online training. So when we do the longer term courses, for example, the University of Chicago course that we offer in a classroom setting, typically it will be in the, so right now this course is running out of the Hilton in the Embassy Golf Links office space, right? But for our short term courses, we don't have any classroom training. It's all done online. The second part of your question, if you're looking to move at a strategy or chief of staff role, I think the strategy role, for sure, you will need a better understanding of data science. You may not need to become a machine learning expert, but you will need to be able to talk intelligently about data and data related topics. So I would definitely recommend looking at like a full stack data science program as an example, of something that you should look at. This would not be a long term course, this would be a shorter term course, but it will give you a good solid understanding of analytics and its applications across multiple sectors and industry areas, which should be very useful for you.
Okay, great. The next question, again, I do not have a name here. It says, hi, could you please highlight short-term courses related to financial services data analytics courses?
Certainly. So we have one very popular course, which is essentially, a course that focuses on data science, but specific to the financial services analytics space. Now, the analytics has been very prevalent in the financial services industry. Banks were one of the earliest adopters of predictive analytics models, and even now we see a lot of interest from companies, in training their employees on financial analytics. So we have a data science program that includes an elective. So you can choose an elective that is financial services. So essentially, first you learn all the data science concepts, which is understanding data. How do you generate insights from data? What sort of algorithms are available? When would you apply each of those? And then you focus specifically on use cases and examples that come from the financial services sector. So, for example, analytics for risk, analytics for marketing within the financial services, collections analytics, etc. So we have a very highly specialized course in data science that includes financial services as an elective. So that's what I would recommend. Typically, it will take you about 6 to 7 months to be able to finish both of these, which is the original data science course plus the financial services elective.
Okay.
And it's all online, so you should ideally be able to finish it in about 6 months or so.
Cool. The next question comes from Prita. She's asking, I'm in the development sector. Would like to get into data analysis in this sector. Is there a specialized course for that?
Yeah, so at this point, we don't have a specialized course in just development, but analytics is increasingly being used in the development, public policy sort of sectors, and it's also something that's a lot of interest, fast growing, right? I would recommend looking at a data science course because there are some fundamental concepts that you will learn anyway as part of the data science course, and B, We use examples from multiple sectors, one or two from the development sector as well. But you will also be able to sort of understand how you would be able to apply some of these techniques specific to the development sector. So that's something that we could definitely help with. But I would recommend looking at a data science course and get started, because that is going to become again very, very important.
Fair enough. The next question is from Navneet Kaur. She's asking, after completing HR analytics certification, how to land a job in HR analytics, considering the fact that companies prefer candidates with experience. What is the average salary for a beginner?
So two things. If you're already from an HR background, right, and this is where I talk about positioning, right? You don't want to make it sound like, okay, I have an HR background, now I've learned some analytics, and now I want to look at an analytics role within HR, and I'm willing to start as a fresher. That's not how you want to position yourself, right? You want to position yourself as somebody who has expertise in HR in general, including analytics. And now at your stage of the career, you are a good person to add to any team, because not only do you understand HR, but you also understand how analytics can be applied in HR, and you have some examples and a work product that you can showcase that tells people that, hey, for example, I did this, and this is sort of the output that I was able to generate, or the value that I was able to generate. So it's also about positioning. Like, yes, companies always look for experience, but you can generate some experience by working on live projects. You can generate some experience by applying what you're learning already to the data that you already have as an HR professional, right? And you can start showcasing that, and we can help you definitely do that. This is exactly what I mean by saying the positioning, right? You need to be able to somehow showcase yourself as somebody who already has understanding of HR, understanding of HR analytics, and some experience in applying analytics to HR data. Absolutely, you
Fair
can do
enough.
that. And I don't, the beginner question, I really don't, I feel like that question is a little meaningless, because you don't want to start as a beginner, right? It is difficult for you to say that, hey, I'm going to forget about all my experience and start off as a fresher. No company will hire you, and it is wrong for you to not leverage your past experience, right? You want to be able to generate a premium over what you're already getting, because you have additional skills. And so that's what you should focus on.
Correct. Okay, HR seems to be the theme of the day, Sarita. The next question is also in the similar space. She's asking, can I be a HR analyst even if I have no experience in HR? I have 4 years experience as software developer, but took 5 years break. Can I restart in HR? Also, let me know the tools used for being an analyst in client support. So I believe, if she's got software development experience, she should be able to leverage that, right?
Yeah, so if you think about HR analytics roles, right, you have to have understanding of analytics and you have to have understanding of HR, right? And my advice to you is to not attempt both of them at the same time, right? Because it is a stretch, right? So are you interested in HR analytics because you're interested in analytics, or because you're interested in HR? Which one is first, right? And do one thing at a time. If you're interested in analytics, then given your background as a software developer, start with, let's say, some big data analytics, build some analytics experience, and then try and work, try and make a move into HR analytics that way. If your primary interest is to say that, look, long term I want to be in HR and not in software development, then first build some expertise in HR, right? Then add analytics on top of the HR. But if you try to do both at the same time, it is going to be very difficult. An employer will say, you're a software developer and you're applying for HR analytics jobs, you don't have experience in HR, you don't have experience in analytics. That becomes a very big problem. First, again, one thing at a time. Do you want to do analytics first or HR first? Depending on that, you can add the next step. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend starting off directly as an HR analyst, because I think that is going to be hard for you.
Okay, cool. The next question is, it seems you do have a gentleman amongst us, is from Sriram. He's asking, I'm a data modeler and have experience in BI. Since 6 months, I'm learning supervised ML, machine
Supervised,
learning.
yeah.
Supervised, is it? Okay. Is it good to look for job? I'm also interested for text mining. How is this different from supervised learning?
So,
Hello?
what works to your advantage is that you already are in a data related field, and you are in you have experience in business intelligence, and analytics is a logical extension of that. So, from a career growth and planning perspective, I think you're on the right track. Now, in terms of what you're learning, I'm not very sure why you're only learning supervised machine learning, right? Because it's a very small area within analytics. My recommendation to you is to take a look at learning data science and machine learning rather than just supervised machine learning, because it is very hard for you, because then you're limiting the kind of jobs that you can apply to, right? You only have supervised machine learning, you don't have anything else, right? So one advice would be, please take a look at a course that covers more topics in data science and machine learning, not just supervised machine learning, which is a very small topic within data science. Text mining, yes, a lot of interest in text mining. It is essentially the ability to generate information out of text data. So review data, or any sort of text, Twitter data, Facebook posts, etc. Can we generate insights and analytics from text data? Very, very interesting. How is it different from supervised learning? Well, sometimes text mining is supervised and sometimes it's unsupervised. Supervised is when you have an outcome in mind and you have a dependent variable, right? Typically, you want to understand everything related to that dependent variable. For example, supervised learning could be, is this a positive review or a negative review, right? So you want to be able to classify it as positive or negative. So that is supervised learning. Unsupervised is when you don't really have any outcome in mind. So for example, let's say that I have 100,000 customers that visit my website. Can I group my customers into sort of more smaller groups that share some similar characteristics? I don't have any outcome variable in mind. I'm simply looking for some understanding, and that is unsupervised learning. Again, my advice to you is, I don't think it's a good idea for you to focus on such a niche skill set only. I would recommend do like a full stack program that includes data science, that includes machine learning, that includes a lot of different things, because that broadens your ability to apply for jobs. You can develop specific interests after you've gotten into analytics, right? Right now, it may be too narrow.
Okay. Okay. The next question is from Asifa. She's asking, have been on a long break with last experience in health insurance. If I take up data analytics, would it open options of working from home?
Um, so again, so couple of things here. One is that I think if you have health insurance experience, then data science and data analytics would be helpful, as long as you are able to continue in the field of healthcare or health insurance, right? Analytics is applied quite tremendously in healthcare industry and the insurance industry, and there are a lot of roles and jobs available for people who can apply analytics to health data, right? So as a field, analytics is very, very useful for the healthcare industry, and I think so that makes it a good option for you. Just make sure that you are targeting to continue in the health insurance industry and not try to look at other industries at this point. Working from home is, again, that's a larger question. There are companies that enable working from home options, but it is not, it is a very specific to a company, specific to a role kind of question, right? I understand that may be a limitation that you have, but yeah, analytics as a field is something that can be done, quite effectively working from home 60-70% of the time. Of course, you will have to interact with other people and other stakeholders, but of course, nowadays we have options to interact on the phone, on video calls, on Skype, etc. But in general, analytics is something that is quite amenable to work from home options. But obviously, it depends on the company, it depends on your role. You could definitely look at it.
Okay. I think this is a trailing question from one that you've already answered. We've got a question asking, can you let me know the tools used being an analyst in client support? For being an analyst in
Yeah,
client
so
support.
the tools are not necessarily specific to a particular industry or sector, right? So if you're in client support and let's say you're trying to do visualizations, you will use Tableau or ClickView, like everyone else. If you are in client support and let's say you're trying to do some sort of predictive modeling that says what will be the volume of questions that I am expecting next month, then you will end up using something like an R or a SAS or a Python. So they're not necessarily specific to a particular industry or sector. They are specific to the outcomes, right? And it could be across industry sectors.
Okay. Cool. So that's about it, Sarita. That's all the questions we have for you today. It was a super insightful session, but just to sort of give them, if somebody wants to know more, if somebody wants to get in touch with you directly, if somebody needs more counseling, more understanding in regards to analytics as a career option, is there a way to reach out to you?
Absolutely. Let me just come back to this particular slide.
Sure.
If you go to jigsawacademy.com, you can call or email us. The phone number is listed here. I will also share my email ID on chat for people that want to directly reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions. This is something that I feel quite strongly about, that people that are coming back into the job market after a break definitely need help, and definitely need mentoring. That's something that I'm very happy to do. And even otherwise, just in general, for the data science field, it's a field that I've built my career in. It's been very exciting, very fulfilling. It's something that I've really enjoyed, and I strongly feel that it's a field that works really well for women. And I'm very happy to help people who are thinking about data science. Any kind of help you need, feel free to write to me. I'm happy to answer that. Let me just make sure that I send my email address to everyone. I think I was on private
Okay.
chat. Let me see, sarita@jigsawacademy.com. And our website is jigsawacademy.com. So you can go to our website, and there's a phone number as well available if you'd like to talk to me. I think we have
Wonderful. Are
another
you
question.
happy? Yeah. Are you happy to take one more question? I was
Yeah.
asking. Okay. So how do you think this analytics is helpful for people in research field, particularly in food science, having good experience in R&D in FMCG?
FMCG.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, these are all very specific, but FMCG companies are extensive user of analytics, and a lot of research is, a lot of research requires quantitative skills. So definitely that's something that, is applicable, FMCG. Now, again, it depends on the kind of research that you do. If you're primarily doing qualitative research, then you want to add some quantitative research abilities to your skill set, which is where data science comes in. So this is something that I think you should take a look at.
Okay, we have one more question, Sarita. People do not want you to go.
No problem. I'm happy to answer.
So, Shravanti is asking, as you said earlier, taking up either HR or analytics first and working towards the other after a career break is preferable. Is it possible to land a job by taking up any long-term course in domain specific, for example, HR, marketing, analytics course, or any internship? So she says she does not want to use her software development experience. She still wants to build up a career in HR analytics or marketing analytics. But do you think if she takes a long-term course with you, would she be able to land a job?
Yeah, look, you can definitely try, right? Again, I don't want to say that it is not possible. It is definitely possible. But, practically speaking, um, I think you are going to find that most people are going to look at, like it is a challenge to convince people about two things compared to one thing, right? And a lot of these domain specific courses, HR marketing, for example, the courses that we offer at Jigsaw, we spend a lot of time explaining what that domain is, right? So for HR, we do talk about the HR domain specifically, because many people not necessarily, they may be in that domain, but they don't necessarily understand everything about that domain, right? So for example, e-commerce analytics, we have a course called e-commerce analytics, where we talk about what do people look at when they look at e-commerce, what kind of data, what kind of KPIs, what kind of goals, etc. So we provide that information. But having said that, if you are looking at a very domain specific analytics role, then people expect some connection to the domain in the past, right? uh, there is no harm in trying, right? If you know that you definitely want to be in HR analytics, then definitely no harm in trying. But you have to be prepared for the fact that more people are going to say that, I'm not sure why I should hire you for HR analytics, because you don't have analytics experience or HR experience. But internships is a great option. One way that I would strongly encourage women, especially people who are coming back into the workforce, is to strongly look at internships, right? Because sometimes the barrier to entry is high, right? And if you're willing to spend 3 months with a company, let's say a startup or a mid-sized company, and say, hey, I will work for you, and maybe I'm not really worried about the, the sort of internship, remuneration that I get, what my internship salary is, right? I'm really looking at it as a way to build experience. That's a great way to convince companies, right? And when you land a job, then your salary will be very comparable to, whatever the industry standard is. But the internships, for example, if you think you can get an HR analytics internship, that's a great way to build credibility in that space. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Perfect. All right, Sarita, thank you so much for making time. Once again, people who want to get in touch with Sarita directly, there are numbers on the screen just now. There are email addresses on the screen. You can also reach out to Sarita directly at sarita@jigsawacademy.com. And she's been very kind overall. She's been helping a lot of women not only restart their careers, but also move up the career ladder and really build up their strong profiles in analytics as such. So reach out to her. Once again, Sarita, thank you so much for making time. Really, really appreciate this. And yeah, have a wonderful day ahead, everybody.
Okay, thank you everyone. I've enjoyed the questions. Again, feel free to reach out to me. Sheetal, thank you very much. I've enjoyed the session as always.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Sarita. Bye-bye.